Hey there, friends. But we are coming very quickly to the end of Jesus' ministry and his life now. And we're going to start crossing over into what we call in our church services Holy Week. So we start with two stories, the story of the raising of Lazarus and Jesus' interaction with a man named Zacchaeus. And both of these stories happen as Jesus is coming closer and closer to Jerusalem for the last time. Lazarus is a story that highlights something that we've seen before in the life of Jesus, namely that people oppose him. And in this particular case, it's the Sadducees and Pharisees, and they see how Jesus is becoming more and more popular, and they worry that he's eventually going to cause the Romans to take notice, and that they'll put their foot down and really destroy the people of Israel. So opposition rises out of Jesus' great miracle of raising his friend Lazarus from the dead. Raising his friend Lazarus, though, also foreshadows for us what's going to be in next week's story, namely Jesus' own resurrection, which we'll read about next week. So we have this sense of rising opposition, and yet Jesus also offering the kingdom to the wrong sorts of people. Zacchaeus is a tax collector. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. He's a collaborator with the Romans. He is an enemy of the people of Israel, at least as far as they are concerned. And this sense of rising opposition just keeps on growing. Jesus rides triumphantly into Jerusalem, and the crowds acclaim him. He is hailed with palm branches, which is usually a sign of victory. He is riding on a colt, a young donkey, and the idea there is that he is the king like David. But what they don't understand is that he's a very different kind of king coming to make a very different kind of victory. And we'll have to wait on that until next week when we see how his kingship plays out. In that moment, though, the religious leaders of Israel, they object to Jesus, tell your followers to be quiet, and they're getting more and more worried about him. And then through that week, from Palm Sunday until Easter, Jesus goes to the temple, and there his opponents set a number of traps for him. They try to trick him in his words to get him to say something wrong, that he will turn the crowds against himself. But that never happens. So eventually the chief priests and Jesus' opponents have to resort to trickery and treachery. And they bribe Judas to betray him. If you can't beat him, I guess you need to cheat, is the idea. It's not a very nice idea, but that seems to be the idea that they're working with. And when they do finally arrest Jesus, it's not in front of the crowds. No, when they finally arrest Jesus, they arrest him in the dead of night in the Garden of Gethsemane. His opponents can't best him, not in public. So they choose instead to arrest him in the middle of the night. We'll talk a little bit more about how that plays out next week as we finish up the story of Jesus. I'll see you then.